Hello, the beautiful ladies and gentlemen listening to On the Line. I am Jen Gerson, and today with me we have Brandon Forsyth, who has been a book buyer at Indigo Books for the last 10 years. We're going to talk about his top recommendations for fiction and nonfiction books, how all of these latest trends in books feature into current affairs, politics, also, the collective subconscious, really great fun stuff. And then in our second segment, we're going to have a talk about book trends, what he's seeing in the industry. It's a really, really fascinating deep dive into books, life, culture, all of that. I hope you enjoy it a lot. And that is today on the Line with Brandon Forsyth.
This episode of On the Line is brought to you by Airbnb. It's no secret that Canada is in a housing crisis. Some think that short-term rentals such as Airbnbs are the problem, but the closer you look, the clearer it gets. Attempts to lower rents by regulating short-term rentals have failed in cities like New York City, which is experiencing record-high rents a year after doing so. Canada doesn't need more regulation, it needs more supply. And Airbnbs that could be converted into long-term homes account for only 0.6% of Canada's housing stock. Learn more at Airbnb.ca/closerlook.
So, Brandon Forsyth from Indigo. Look, I have to be honest with you. Of all the careers that one could have, professional book buyer is one that is definitely going to cause envy among many of our listeners, my husband included. He is kind of a perpetual book hoarder. So the idea that you could just have a job in which you are buying books for a living, and I presume reading a lot of those books, that sounds pretty delightful. Can you, before we get into it, I do want to have a conversation about what books we need to be reading this summer. You're obviously at the head of all of the book trends. How do we make ourselves sound smart at dinner parties over the next few months is absolutely what we're coming to you for. But first, I want to ask you, how in the world did you land that gig?
It's a pretty great job, I have to admit. Some days I pinch myself that the problems that I'm facing are actually kind of like dream problems. It's like, make a shelf of beautiful books that you love and curate. And you're like, oh man, do I have time for this? And you're like, yes, I absolutely have time for this. It's the coolest thing ever. So yeah, it's a great job. I started in an Indigo store 14 years ago. I was a cashier at the Yorkdale Mall location in Toronto here. Slowly over time, I managed a store. I came to home office to do some inventory work for us. And a job opened up being a book buyer. And I had sort of accumulated sort of a bunch of the skills needed to do that and haven't really looked back since. It's a wonderful, wonderful job. And the only problem is that you don't get to read as much as you would like to, unfortunately. You get to see everything, but that means you have an almost endless list of amazingly cool things you could be reading, and you're aware of so much. But happy to share some ideas about what is the best stuff for people that have less time to read great books.
Yes, we will get into that. But first, I just came up with two really quick questions. One, how many books do you have in your house?
Jen, it would probably be terrifying to actually count them all up. This frame is very carefully composed to show you the books that I have not on stacks and piles all around me.
So the frame is composed to make it look like you're not a horrible book hoarder. Like we're not sending A&E intervention into your home, at this point. Okay.
It would be terrifying, but I would probably put it somewhere, I don't have the biggest living space in the world. There are probably 500, 600 books here easily. And it's a constant battle to sort of manage that, to be honest with you.
So I bet your friends really love you because they're just like, have any books you want to hear? The other quick question I was going to ask, just based on what you said there, is that, part of your job, of course, is curating books in a way that it appeals to a retail consumer. Mm-hmm. So how much of your decision making about what books you buy is rooted in what the books actually look like? Like literally, how much do you judge a book by its cover?
It is an enormous part of my job, actually, because I think as we've seen over time and I think we're going to maybe talk about some book trends a little later, but social media has become an increasingly important aspect of why people buy books, and having a beautiful cover that visually grabs attention in your Instagram reel or your TikTok video has only increased with time. And so a large part of my job, not the entirety of the job, but a good chunk of it is working with publishers to say, hey, look at this cover you've designed and look at these covers that are seeing success in the market. Can we get something closer to that? Can we take inspiration from these covers? So it's a big part of the job is like visually, what does the product look like? Obviously, the most important part of my job is what is the content of the book? How does it speak to people? How does it written? But it is a significant part of it. My job is judging books by their covers quite a bit, actually.
Interesting. Okay, look, we're going to get into book trends and the impact of social media on how people read and whether or not they read at all is a really interesting thing. But I know a lot of people are going to be coming to this podcast because they want your recommendations for what are some of the books that are hot right now. What are some of the books that people should be reading into August and fall? And how in the world do I make myself look more educated than I actually am by the books I put on my coffee table? So, are there things that you can recommend? Let's start with fiction. Can we start with fiction? Because I mean, summer seems like it's a very fiction time of year. People are really into the easy breezy beach read.
Totally.
What are you recommending for the summer?
Summer is a great time to sort of, if not turn our brains off, then maybe relax the gear a little bit, right? And I think, so I have a couple fiction recommendations for you. I think first on my list is Mick Herron's Slow Horses series. One of the things I love about the summer is you've got maybe a little bit more time and you can get into a series. If you've seen the phenomenally successful Apple TV adaptation of these books, you're familiar with Gary Oldman's great portrayal of this sort of over-the-hill spy and his collection of sort of rejects that he's put together. But the books are actually really like savagely funny, dark, still like these pulse-pounding action thrillers that you get all your spy drama from, but it's deeply invested in a lot of the politics of Europe and Brexit in particular. They're written right around that time. So there's a little bit more to it. It's kind of one of my favorite writers of all time was John le Carré, who we unfortunately lost a couple years ago.
Yep.
Mick Herron is the closest that we have to something like that, who's taking these kind of genre trappings and really elevating it with some very darkly funny writing. I love them so much. And they're different enough from the show that if you have seen the show, there's something extra for folks who want to explore more. But if you've never watched the show either, they're just great spy thrillers with this sort of little more literary feel.
So I love le Carré, and I've always been a fan of his. And one of the things that I loved about his career and his progression is that he went from being this absolutely compelling Cold War writer to being like almost insanely cynical by the end of his career. Like I think one of his last novels was about I think it was the Iraq War, right? It was the War on Terror, and just the level of like nihilism, just faithlessness. The faithlessness. I mean, he was always sort of at his when he wrote some of the earlier novels. He was definitely willing to explore the shadow within the West's side of it. It's not like he ever gave us a pass, right? But by the end, like the idea that there was a good side or a bad side was like had been eliminated in his mind, and I think that was very. It was almost portentous. It was almost a prediction of the decline in faith in our own institutions.
One of my favorite scenes of all literature, right, is at the end of Smiley's People, where you've got Smiley and Carla, these two, great adversaries, and they both sort of like, what was this all for, right? And so, I think he was, and I think even to the point, like, right before he died, right, he renounced his British citizenship, which I think was like a huge step for someone like that to take, who was so a product of the establishment there. So
of the establishment,
I love his books. I'll go back to them every day. I'm so sad we're not getting more. His son is writing books in that universe, which are really great too. But Mick Herron is great.
I always have very mixed feelings when the children take up the imaginative world of the parents, because it never seems to quite hold up. It's like, make something new. So Slow Horses, tell me a little bit about Slow Horses specifically. Can you give me a kind of a plot, just a quick plot summary?
Yeah, so the very first book is about a sort of kidnapping that happens on the streets of Britain. There's sort of this extreme paranoia and a media frenzy that follows, thinking that it's part of sort of a terror plot. And I don't want to give too much away, but it's a little more complicated than that. And the heroes of the series are these sort of washed up or spies that have made these huge mistakes in the field, and they can't be fired necessarily from their jobs, but they're sort of shoveled off to this.
God bless the union.
That's right.
God bless the spy union.
So there's this kind of group of people that are either trying to prove themselves desperately to try to get back in, or these folks that are sort of at peace with this idea of like I'm over the hill. Nobody expects anything of me, and so they're these really fun heroes. That's like this kind of ragtag collection of people that you really grow close to. And Heron is ruthless with them in the series. Just when you start to love somebody, they will be brutally killed off. So go in with your eyes wide open on that front.
So it's a little bit like Suicide Squad, but for grown-ups.
That's an interesting comparison. Yes, kind of like that. Yeah.
All right. I'm into it. If you use the Le Carré, so I'm going to get that one. Slow Horses series, and what's the author again?
Mick Heron. He's a British crime writer. He's won a ton of awards, and we actually just at Indigo we just launched a series of exclusives, which have a nice. This packages have always been, to the point that we raised earlier, I've always felt that the covers are not quite giving you the Le Carré vibe, so we asked for these custom covers that have a little bit more of a Le Carré feel that you'll find in our stores only.
Oh, yeah, your audience. You got it. All right, fine. One. You've succeeded. The sale has been made.
Amazing.
Right. Next, show me what else do we got?
Yeah, so I think in the other fiction space, the other author that I really want to highlight is R.F. Kuang. For those who are unfamiliar with her, she has kind of taken the fantasy world by storm. She had a trilogy of books that were kind of geared to a YA audience called the Poppy War Trilogy. They're a reworking of sort of Mao Zedong and in a fantasy context, sort of transposed onto this teenage girl.
Bright and cheerful. Like, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret, except with more, brutal murder of your teachers.
With like some great famines and dragons and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great. Cool.
So that she kind of came to TikTok's attention through that series, but she has really elevated her game since then, in my opinion. She wrote a book a couple years ago called Babel, which had all the sort of Philip Pullman, His Dark Materials kind of vibes. She wrote a great, very funny literary thriller called Yellowface 2 years ago, which was all about sort of diversity efforts in publishing and the way those are very complicated and not clear cut. It was savage. It took down everybody, and it was it was really funny. But she has a new book this summer in August called Catabasis, which is about a descent into hell. It's a very funny setup again, where two thesis students at this school of magic, their professor is killed in this horrific accident, and they're so close to graduating that they figure the best way to just do that is to go down to hell, get him back, and then we'll graduate. But she builds out this really elaborate world. It's like fantasy is having a real moment right now with a younger readership. This is a adult fantasy, and it plays on Dante and Homer and all of these great sort of literary inspirations. She is incredibly smart. She's graduated from Cambridge and Oxford, and I think she's studying at Yale now. It's like she's incredibly smart, and her prose is like wicked sharp. I really love her, and I think any of her books are great, but this one in the fall is going to be the sort of big fantasy moment in the summer, and I think it'll be a huge breakout book for her as well.
I also really love, there's a lot of fantasy and again, maybe I'm preempting the talk about trends, or we can get into that, but it seems to me like there's almost an attempt to refashion the Harry Potter conceit, but for adults in a lot of the fantasy spaces as well. Like some of the books that I've read are very like, okay, well, you loved being sent off to school as a grammar student. Let's see where this goes when they're like, dark, sexy university students.
That's right. So it's Harry Potter and Twilight, and now what are those people reading 10 years later? It's this kind of stuff for sure.
I admit I'm among the readers. I'm among them.
Too. I am too. It's okay. I think the world building in New Moon, I'll stand up to that any day. It's great.
Oh, I don't know, man. The Twilight series, I did kind of run through that one, but I do think it's sort of interesting, and I do appreciate that there's an effort to force Harry Potter fans to grow up. That's probably necessary. It's probably time. Yep. And if we grow up into dark, psychologically sophisticated fantasies about magical people in schools, that's fine, so long as it's for adults. I think I'm preempting my rant about adults reading young adult fiction, but let's put a pin in that. Do you have any other fiction suggestions?
Yeah, I think one other thing for me, I'm a huge genre reader, if that's not clear, and there's another Apple TV show that just started up called Murderbot.
Okay.
It stars Stellan Skarsgård and a bunch of fun people, but they're based on these science fiction books that are so much fun. They're set in a distant future where it's narrated by this security robot who's like basically a killing machine, who's set out to guard certain, corporations, people, whatever. And it becomes sort of self-actualized and self-aware in a sort of AI type moment. And I think the narration from this robot character is some of my favorite genre writing of the last 10 years. It's so funny. It's also really touching. It's like this coming of age type thing, but your host is this killing machine robot. Very fun.
The book is actually called Murderbot then?
The Murderbot Diaries, yes.
Murderbot Diaries. Okay, got it. Murderbot Diaries.
Condition Red, which I think is just a great fun read for the summer. It transports you to this other world, and I think there's 7 different books at this point. So again, a series maybe that you can get into.
Okay, see, my problem with a lot of these series is they assume some kind of singularity, some moment when AI is going to become self-realized and self-aware. Most people aren't self-realized and self-aware. I think we're asking a lot about a glorified autocorrect, but that's just my opinion on the matter. You can take it or leave it, she said, 5 minutes before the robots come crashing in.
It's fun to imagine and maybe helpful in some contexts.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so obviously you have tailored this list to appeal to me personally, because but one of the things that I'm deeply aware of is the fact that I'm a weirdo. And most people really probably do just want a romance book. Is there anything that's in the sphere of, as I said, I'm taking it to the cottage and I want to have some naughty feelings, but maybe not obviously naughty feelings in front of my parents. You know what I mean? Something that I can still have a little bit of quiet fun in the corner with, but not something that it's not 50 Shades of Grey, so that if my mom wants to read a page, I have some explaining to do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Is there something that's in that space?
For sure. And I mean, romance is having such a moment right now. It is the single biggest category, I think, for Indigo right now. The flood of readers that has come into romance.
It definitely does make me question my life decisions. As a writer, I know I'm going to write about Canadian politics instead of sex. That was brilliant. That was so good of me.
Listen,
just on the ball, Jen.
A lack of a sexy Canadian politics book. So if you want to start working on that on the side.
Nobody wants that. No one. No.
Terry
Fallis is the closest that we got with that. And
right.
Absolutely no one wants sexy. Have you met Canadian politicians?
But it's a fantasy, right? You can make them as attractive as you like. But no.
Let me just stop you right there. Because nothing says sexy like parliamentary procedure. Prorogue. What does the word prorogue do for you?
There's something there. I'm telling you. I'm feeling something. But there is a ton of romance in our stores right now, and I think the sort of 2 lead authors that I would call out there in terms of getting that exact sort of feeling of maybe sexy but not too sexy would be Carly Fortune, who's a great Canadian writer, former journalist, who has transitioned into romance books. And she's done this a couple of great books now at this point. And I think the most recent one is called One Golden Summer. It's very much like a cottage romance. It's perfect for that kind of attitude where you're on the dock reading or something like that. And then the other one that I would call it is Abby Jimenez. She's an American writer. Her most recent book is Say You'll Remember Me. She writes romance that has a little bit more of a literary feel. It's not just about the sort of rom-com elements of that genre. There are some genuine feelings and connection that you feel with the characters after you're done. We had an event with her recently in Toronto where someone pulled a fire alarm in the middle of the event, and all these firefighters, smoking hot firefighters, showed up in the middle of the event, and there was just screams and shouts heard all across the social media landscape. But her books are, I think, kind of the best in the genre. Her most recent one was actually in our best of the year list last year, and we very rarely have a romance that cracks that sort of level. So there's some real literary merit to her as well.
What was the name of the last book you said?
So that's Abby Jimenez, Say You'll Remember Me.
Say You'll Remember Me. Okay. So fun fact about Carly Fortune. I actually went to school with Carly Fortune.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, just by coincidence. And every single day, my heart is filled with jealousy because, of course, she made it. She made it. She made it. And by made it, I mean made it out. Made it out. And now has a successful, happy life with a wonderful career. So good for her. But
I did not mean to bring up some traumatic memories.
On behalf of those of us whom she left behind in the dust to slave away in a wildly successful journalism industry. I'm tempted to be like, make a joke. But anyway, no, it's all good. It's all good. Okay. Good for Carly Fortune. Yes. And also, I think that also one of her books was optioned by Meghan and Harry, right? Does the thing? Yeah, her books. Yeah,
I think that's right.
That was an interesting news that came up in sort of some of the local group chats. Is that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, their company optioned one of her books for a movie. Which on one hand, I'm like, you go, girl. And on the other hand, I'm like, unfortunately, it's Meghan and Harry. But, that's not, hell, go for it. But anyway, I actually hope that actually comes through for Carly's sake, because that would be fantastic for her. And it's always wonderful to have someone who you kind of know, albeit tangentially, do well. It's kind of a cool thing to watch. So, yeah. All right. Are there any other books on the fiction before we transition to my realm of darkness, which is nonfiction?
I think that's my realm too. So I think let's jump over to the nonfiction side if you're in for it.
All right. Nonfiction. Tell me, what is coming out imminently or has come out on nonfiction that we need to be, as I said, putting on our coffee table to make ourselves look smart?
Well, I thought for your audience in particular, one of the books that has really surprised me this summer is Andrew Coyne's Crisis in Canadian Democracy. I'm not sure if it's come up for you guys before, but a really powerful and snarkily written book by Andrew. And I think
snarky is what he does.
Indeed. But his character really comes through in what is otherwise a relatively wonky book. But what has surprised me is that people have really flocked to it. It has become one of our bestsellers in the history category in general. And I think it's really encouraging to me in terms of people being engaged in the questions of what is going on in our democracy and how to maybe generate some more local pressure on some of the parties to sort of change the way they operate. I
just want to know, is he still pushing mandatory voting?
There are pieces about that in the book, yes. But
no, we're not. We can't do mandatory voting. That's a bad idea, Andrew. We don't want low information, low engagement people like coming to the polls. We want to have those people self-sorting themselves out.
This is your opportunity to rebut him in printed form, Jen. I'm waiting for that book from you. Let's do it.
Let me finish the one I'm trying to finish.
Okay, sure. You can do that too.
I can also just write a column and just be like, no, Andrew. That'll be fun. Is there anything else that, can you give us kind of a synopsis on maybe some of the other ideas that are in the book that he suggests that I can rebut sort of without...
Well, I would encourage folks to
fair at all.
Because there's quite a bit in there. I mean, he really goes through step by step in terms of both how leaders are elected, and I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas around sort of local party membership and attendance at local party meetings and things like that, and ways to drive engagement in that level of our democracy. But I think the other big pieces that he has are really around how much power is allowed to be centralized in the PMO, and perhaps some specific legislation around what they are and are not able to do, which is, I think, when you think about some of the ways that our systems, even globally, have been eroded in terms of just norms, social norms, behaviors around these things that aren't necessarily written in black and white. I think there's a lot of really interesting arguments in this book about we should have some of these social norms written down in black and white so that when they are broken, it is actually something that they can be held accountable for. So
yeah, the interesting. I mean, he's right to identify that problem. I mean, we know that over, especially pre-Harper, really, but I mean, especially over Harper and Trudeau,
Mhm.
more and more power has been centralized in the Prime Minister's office at the expense of where power is supposed to be held in our system, and that's in the hands of the actual elected MPs.
Right.
But there's so little civic literacy on some of those issues that people don't actually understand. Even sometimes the MPs themselves don't understand where their actual power and responsibility now lies, right?
Yeah.
So we've created this kind of executive system out of the Westminster parliamentary system, and it's a really, really inappropriate and bizarre mishmash. Just as an aside note, and again, because we're in my wheelhouse, I'm going to rant a little bit. But one of the major problems that we've had in the reason why that's been allowed to happen is because we've moved away from the idea of caucus choosing its leader and into a movement where the parties now choose a leader, usually through various forms of delegated or one member, one vote style systems, which has moved power away from the caucus and away from the MPs and moved it into the party system. So a leader can say, well, I don't care if you caucus don't like me. I have a democratic mandate from the members of our party, even if you're just Trudeau and that, one vote that made you leader was 10 years ago. Right. So it's a really, really interesting problem. We've created this bizarre hybrid of an American Republican style system and attached it to a British Westminster parliamentary system. And we have like kind of the worst of both systems. So quintessentially Canadian. And I think it's sort of it's held together by a kind of sense of stiff upper lip Canadian politeness that will inevitably become problematic and shatter. So anyway, if he's got some productive ideas for how to fix that, that's great. But I think that these trends are kind of baked in to some extent. I don't see anybody coming to power and saying, I know I'm going to delegate more of my authority away from the Prime Minister's office and make sure that my unruly MPs have more freedom to tank my daily news agenda, right? Like all of the incentives are aligned against that kind of an approach.
Yeah, power is a hell of a drug, right? Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly. And this is why we don't get electoral reform.
But I do think like the thing that has really heartened me when I read the book, I thought, I'm fascinated by this. I think politicos will be fascinated by this, but I have really been encouraged by how widely it has sold. And I think that, to your point, maybe is a indication that people want to educate themselves in that idea of a sort of civics refresher, sort of, in terms of what our role can be. So I'm looking at that as in a very hopeful way, but I do think there's something really encouraging going on there.
Well, the other thing encouraging I would add to that is one thing that I get very frustrated with is when I talk to normal people, and I do talk to some, not many, but some normal people, and how totally disenfranchised they feel from the system. The system's rigged. There's nothing I can do. There's no way I can get involved. And I'm like, you actually couldn't be more wrong, just so that we're clear. Like, have you gone to your local constituency association and volunteered? Like, have you done, like, there are a lot of really, like, they're desperate for anybody with really even a basic level of intelligence, like just minimum. Can you dial a phone? If you can dial a phone, you can participate in the political process in a very meaningful way. And in the end of the day, the world belongs to the people who show up. Totally. So if you don't show up and learn how to use the system, then other people will, and you're going to get increasingly butt out of it. Like the normies need to reaffirm some control, man. Mm-hmm. But the normies don't listen to me. The revolution of the normies must commence. So anyway, that's a really interesting thing, and I think that the fact that he's done well. I mean, I'm always glad to see someone like Andrew do well. That's a great sign for me. But I hope that also heralds some change and it heralds some inspiration among normal people to get more politically engaged. Yeah. Of course, the second they start to become politically engaged, they cease to be normal. I don't know. This is an insoluble problem.
It could be a new standard of normal, though, right?
A new standard of normal. There.
I'm engaged. I want to play my part in building that.
Yeah. If Andrew Coyne's book is inspiring you to get involved in politics, that's probably for the good.
Yes.
There you go. All right. What else do we have in nonfiction?
Well, taking up on that idea of like the only thing that's changed history is a small group of people that turn up. I wanted to recommend a book by the Dutch philosopher and economist Rutger Bregman, who has generated a lot of headlines over the years, but I think his new book, Moral Ambition, is a very interesting book around that idea of finding a purpose. And I think it's really geared towards young people in particular. But there's something I think in this book for everybody, especially in a world where I think, to the point maybe we were raising earlier, there's a lot of apathy and sort of acceptance of sort of the culture that we've generated. I think he has written this book in the idea of finding those people that have followed a a problem, a passion, an obsession, and tried to build something that addresses those things. Some of his examples that he's looking at in a lot of ways are abolition, suffragettes, those kinds of folks that have really been painted in history as sort of like, saints, martyrs, but overlooked the kind of like, what was it that actually got them to actually take action? In hindsight, these movements look like they were the result of pure reason, and we accept them at face value. He's done a really good job at looking at what is it about these people, and he's kind of generated these lists of sort of 7 recommendations that kind of ground the book around noticing a problem and then doing something about it, and motivating yourself to do something about it, and surrounding yourself with people that feel a similar impulse. And he's done a lot of really, really interesting work in terms of actually building some structures for people to address these things. He's actually created a school out of this thing that gives people grants to go off and try to tackle a big problem, and sort of think in a global sense about some of these things. I found it a really challenging book in a lot of ways. And I found that about a lot of his books. He had a book of history called Humankind a couple of years ago that looks at some of the like worst parts of humanity, those things that we think we know the story of why they happened. And he really challenges a lot of the cultural assumptions around those moments, something like the Milgram shock experiments or concentration camps. And there was a lot of really he's a very interesting thinker. And this book in particular really made me examine my life and kind of think about what I wanted to do differently. He's a very interesting guy, and I think he'll be on that sort of public intellectual stage for the next 10, 20 years with a lot of interesting ideas about how to change the world.
Okay, and just if we can say his name in the book again?
Yeah, so that's Rutger Bregman, and the book is called Moral Ambition.
Okay, so I got to be honest, what you're describing here sounds like something I would totally hate. Which is not to say I wouldn't read it. Like, I probably will read it. But one thing is that, firstly, this sounds like a smarter version of Jordan Peterson. Like the smart kids version of Jordan Peterson.
There's some similarity
it's like,
there.
On one hand, it's Jordan Peterson's like, accept the, authority of the lobster and wash your penis. And then like this guy is more like, okay, but maybe also consider creating a purpose for your life and building a life around that purpose, which is great. But the reason why I think I might hate it is because I actually think that we have radically too many people building their sense of identity in their lives around moral causes and narrow moral causes that kind of flare up, burn out, and don't actually lead to meaningful social change. And my counterintuitive take is that I actually think we need more people who are just building good moral lives. And then from those firm, solid foundations, then choose to engage in social or moral causes from those solid, stable foundations. Like right now, I look at, for example, like a Greta Thunberg, and, obviously someone who came to extraordinary, probably maybe too much social prominence on a serious, legitimate issue, climate change. And, once the energy for climate change burned out, she's now switched to a new moral issue, Israel-Palestine. And, in 5 years, she's going to have another issue and another issue and another issue of that. She's an issues junkie, right? That doesn't seem like a good framework or a good role model for an ordinary person to be building a life around. It seems like a much healthier framework would be, no, discover, what you actually want from life. Do you want a family? What kind of family? Build that. Build an education for yourself. Build a career that makes sense for your particular talents. And then once you have an establishment around your life, then you can choose to engage with local politics, national politics, a moral cause, but you're coming that from a place of having a firm sense of self and a firm sense of foundation. Whereas if you're taking people in their 20s who haven't yet built that firm sense of self and firm foundation, and you're saying, throw everything you have at this abstract cause, I think that's a bit of a recipe for creating a lot of unbalanced young people, to be honest with you. But that is a very counterintuitive take right now. I know right now that is not the advice that anybody is buying into, but all that I'm seeing, and I mean, this goes a little bit to the book that I'm writing, I'm seeing like people perpetually expending extraordinary emotional and psychic energy around the omni cause. It's the next big thing. It's the next big moral fight. I'm on the right side of history. I'm fighting for the good fight. And so they're throwing themselves like waves against a rock, like, trying to build a new world that never seems to come. And then the wave rolls back and it's the next cause and the next cause and the next cause and the next cause. So like, I don't know, like I want to read this book before I judge it. because it's possible that he has some really practical ideas. But I actually, from a counterintuitive point of view, I think I might actually hate the advice.
Well, I encourage you to read it and find out. But I think there's something around. I'm glad that you're seeing people who are. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that they feel like they're, pushing for a world that doesn't ever happen. But I think what I see more of is that sense of apathy. And I think what this book is really trying to tackle is like find something that you believe in and maintain focus on it to that point of like switching it for the next cause celeb the next day. I think there's real ideas in this book about how to build a life or build a passion anyways around this thing that sustains you and keeps you going and keeps you focused on it. So maybe not as far apart as you may think.
No, maybe not. And I mean, if I think of my own life, it's like I've built a life for myself around the idea of journalism and the role that I see that journalism has a function in society and as a role, and what I believe that role of journalism should be in society. And so it's like I can cover any particular issue, and I've covered many issues over the years, and those issues have changed, but the fundamental role has remained the same. So right. Like maybe that's the alignment, right? Like maybe it's not necessarily about throwing yourself headlong about the issue of the moment, but it's just about coming to terms with where your moral values are aligned and how you can align those moral values in a way that gives you a purpose over the course of a lifetime, right?
Yeah. And I think there's some interesting data there around the number of people that feel like what they do in a day-to-day thing doesn't actually give them any moral, return.
Purpose. Return,
so, yeah. I think there's something interesting there around that idea that you're both kind of touching on there in that same way, in a different way.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I will withhold my judgment. Hard for me to do. I will withhold my judgment until I read the book in full. Okay. What else? What else do we have from the nonfiction world?
Yeah. So, I mean, a bunch. I think the next one that I wanted to chat to you about was Karen Howe's Empire of AI. This is a big issue.
No. No.
I don't know if you know Karen, but she used to write for the Wall Street Journal. She does some freelance stuff now. She works for The Atlantic a bunch, but she is maybe the best sourced reporter on these big AI companies. She has reported on OpenAI for like essentially since its inception, and she has tremendous sources in that community. And so what I love about, there's a lot of books on AI right now. Everyone is trying to, forecast where is it going? What does it mean? Karen, I think her approach is a lot more like boots on the ground. Who are the people that are building this? What are the issues they're thinking about? And she's also managed to really take a global perspective on it, which is, I think, lacking in a lot of the reporting that we're talking about now. It seems to really be a forecasting game for a lot of people. I think she has really brought this idea of who does this benefit? And what does it cost to make these things happen, these systems happen? And so it's a combination of, it's kind of like a business book in some senses, like you're in there with the engineers talking about how they're building this stuff and what it means for the market. But you're also getting this kind of global perspective where she's traveling to like these plans for these giant hydroelectric dams that are going to power all of this work. And what does that mean for the communities around them and things like that? So it's, I think, the best book that I've read anyways on AI. And because of that sort of approach that she's brought to it, it's really well researched. It's a great work of journalism, but it also has this bigger worldview in it that I think is kind of missing from a lot of the conversation right now.
I remain a bit of an AI skeptic, but I would reiterate a note that I made in a podcast actually earlier this week that it seems to me that the AI itself is neither good nor evil. The AI is just a tool, and it's only as good or evil as the humans who use it.
The Terminator 2 argument, right?
The problem, of course, with that being is that humans are assholes. So we'll see where that goes. Humans are self-destructive monsters. So I really love that we're giving ourselves a tool, giving ourselves the tool to really amplify our self-destructive monstrosity. That's great for us. All right. I think we've got time for like maybe 2 more books, and then I think I'm going to put a pause in it, and then we can talk about book trends.
I'll do 2 quick ones. The first one is my favorite memoir. I actually have a copy of it here. It's called Children Like Us, Brittany Penner. So one of the categories that I buy for Indigo is memoir. So I read a lot of life writing, and I think the best memoirs are. Does
it mostly want to kill you? Does it make you want to kill yourself? Like what is are you into it? Like what's the?
I read a lot. I read 50 pages of a lot of memoirs, to be honest with you. I don't finish a lot of memoirs. But mostly they make me feel good. But I think there is there's kind of two versions of memoir, right? One is the like, you won't believe what this person said, or the crazy life that I lived. And
Britney
the other
Spears.
is this thing that like makes us feel connected with the people around us. And like, you know, you see reflections of your story in someone else's story and you feel connected to this broader swath of humanity. And I think that's what keeps me motivated to buy it, finding those books. This is one of those. Brittany is a Métis woman who grew up in a Mennonite adopted family. They were wonderful parents to her, but they adopted almost 100 children over the course of her time there. And they were one of these families who would sort of, you know, there was an emergency situation. They needed to have a kid to look after while they found a sort of forever home for them. And so she had this rotating cast of siblings that really caused a lot of anxiety for her in terms of her understanding of what a family was and what she belonged to and who she connected to. And so she writes incredibly generously about her parents. Like, these were wonderful people that were trying their best to raise her and all of these other children. But it was not an idyllic childhood in a lot of ways and caused a lot of issues for her later in life. She's gone on to tremendous success. She's a practicing family physician now. She's going to Harvard. She's incredibly smart and well spoken, but the writing in this book was just so wonderful. You have all of these connections that she formed with all these other kids that came through the house, as well as this big extended family that she came to know. And it's just the most wonderful story. It touches obviously on this issue that we're facing in Canada around how do we build a more compassionate care system for children who need it. But it is just wonderfully written. And I'm almost like tearing up thinking about it. There are so many parts of this book that made me just have to like put it down for a little while and just it's wonderful. She's really a writer to watch, and I'm so like excited for it. That comes out later in July. Again, it's called Children Like Us. Brittany Penner. I think she's going to be a big Canadian voice for a long time.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's good to know, because I mean, I'm always very skeptical of memoir. It's the genre that I probably touch the least, and the reason why is twofold. And this is not at all a comment on Brittany Penner's book, because if it made you tear up, I'll take your word for it. But my difficulty with memoir is, firstly, most people aren't as interesting as they think they are. Like they're just not.
From time to time.
Like you're not actually interesting enough to be worth a book. I'm sorry. Maybe a magazine article, and even then, sometimes it's only a trade magazine article. And I'm sorry to be ruthless about that. But then the other problem is a lot of people don't have the self-awareness enough to write a proper memoir. Like there's like a lot of interesting people. There's a lot of fascinating, interesting people.
Yep.
But there's not enough going on in terms of self-examination so you're always getting like a presentation of self.
Yep.
And it always reads as sort of inauthentic, and it's like, well, why did I write about? And I think what was it? David Foster Wallace made this point many, many, many years ago, and that is like, there's nothing worse than an athlete's memoir, because a lot of what makes athletes great is the ability to get into a zone and tune out the intellectual, to not over intellectualize. And the problem is that a memoir is all over intellectualization. Like you kind of need to be a neurotic basket case to write an interesting memoir.
Well, I always remember I got the pleasure to talk to Tara Westover, the author of Educated, just when her book was releasing, before it was this sort of international phenomenon. And she said, I think, something that is so true to me, which is that it's not only your story, it's when you write it, right? And so when she wrote her book, she was right in the middle of sort of reconciling with her family, but not really being able to do that. So having that sense of like generosity and trying to cross those bridges, but still grappling with all of the horrible things that happened as well. I think it's so true. It's not just who you are, it's when you're reflecting on that. And Brittany, I think, is at this place as well, where it's a very vulnerable book, but it's also very compassionate to everyone involved. And I think that's the best kind of memoir.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I think we got room for maybe like one more nonfiction, and then we're gonna put a break in it.
All right. So this one's for my history sickos like me. This is, I think, one of the best writers in nonfiction is the author Scott Anderson. He wrote a book many years ago called Lawrence in Arabia, which folks might remember. It was a sort of examination of post-World War I Middle East, around how those lines were drawn on the map. Very well told. I think he has a real grasp for character, and he is telling the story of the Iranian Revolution in this book later in August, called King of Kings. I am flying through it. It's just one of the most compelling narrative histories that I've ever read. It's a fascinating look at how Iran got to the place that it is now. Obviously, a very important geopolitical place at the moment, and for the last 30 years. But I think the way that Scott Anderson tells a story is kind of like, unlike, I would put him right up there with David Grann in terms of the way he tells history. It's that thing of like, you can smell the salt in the air and the sand in your feet kind of thing. He is a really incredible writer, and he has a lot of personal connection to this story because he was actually in the state Treasury Department, in the U.S. when the revolution happened. So he got to see a lot of the sort of inner workings of how the U.S. was so caught off guard in this. But he tells the story really, really well, and I just love him. I think he's great.
Well, not only does that sound like the kind of book that would make me seem really smart on my coffee book table, but at the same time, it's actually a history book that is entirely relevant to all of the things that is happening in the world right now. So good on you, Scott Anderson. Timed that like a genius. Yes. Love it. Well done. Impressive. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to say like and subscribe. You should go check us out at www.readtheline.ca. I'm also going to make sure that we have the titles and the authors of all of these books both in our show description notes. So if you need to get some details, actually, maybe you can even send me some links to these books, and then we will make sure that they are linked appropriately so that you can check them out if any of them are interesting to you. And after the break, I think that Brandon and I are going to talk a little bit about book trends, book talk, social media. We're going to dig into it a little bit. We're going to get a little deep. So follow after the break, and hope that you enjoy.
This episode is also brought to you by the Métis Nation of Ontario. At Sault Ste. Marie in the 1850s, the Upper Great Lakes and the rivers of northern Ontario are bustling during the summers with the sounds of paddles. Sault Ste. Marie, Fort William, Fort Francis, for Métis voyageurs, these were the highways of a growing trade. Summer was for moving canoes packed with salted fish and furs. Stops were made at supply depots run by Métis families, and a thriving economy was built on a network of Métis communities stretching across the Upper Great Lakes westward. These Métis routes became the arteries of Canada's first economy. This July, while Canadians enjoy their vacations, remember the Métis who spent summers building Canada's first economy. To learn more, visit OntarioMétisFacts.com.
And once again, we have Brandon Forsyth here from Indigo. Brandon, I think that was an excellent overview of all of the books that we should be reading. Most of them, in fact, I think all of them are now on my list for things to pick up. So thank you very much. But you know what? You also have a very just interesting job, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. How long have you been a book buyer exactly? You've been how many years now?
10 years at some point this year. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's been a while.
10 years. So that's a really interesting time to be that particular job. What are some of the big 10-year long trends that you're noticing in terms of what kinds of books are being written and what kinds of books are being read and what kinds of books of maybe are being written but aren't being read?
That's a really big question. I could probably go an hour on that one, to be honest with you. I think especially in the last 5 years in the pandemic world, we have really, I think the biggest overall trend is that people are coming back to reading, which is really exciting. Obviously, we were all at home for a while there. There was not a ton to do. Reading seemed like a good option, but it has really sustained since then as the world has opened back up again. And that. Well,
we have collectively lost all of our social skills. So
books don't
go to a party.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I think the thing that when the pandemic happened, obviously that was almost concurrent with the rise of TikTok. And TikTok has, transformed a lot of industries, but book selling in particular has also really experienced a change there. The wild thing about Book Talk that doesn't get as much attention as I think it should is the way that the books that people really got behind and celebrated on that platform were in many cases like over 10 years old. If you think of things like Sarah J. Maas's The Court of Thorns and Roses, which is sort of the number one romantic-y book that is at the top of so many charts these days. That book was published back in 2014, I want to say, something like that.
But now, to be fair, we have all been in a time warp where we've lost the ability to discern, I would say, the last decade of time passing. So that's,
But that's very unusual in books, right? Like when you have a title that sells that well that many years after publication, it's a real outlier. And so that to me has been really encouraging, because what it means is that good books, or books that hit a certain taste, are really, like, that's the important thing, as opposed to sort of like the buzz or the hype or what's the thing that everyone's talking about. A book's quality is what's really standing out. And I think concurrent with that is that we've seen a rise in the sales of classics and even sort of like Western canon titles. I'm selling more, Plato than I was at any time in the last 10 years.
Is that because we're more fascist now, though? I mean, like,
there may be pieces of that, but I also think that there's something there around people educating themselves on the, what makes a great book, and what has stood the test of time. And so that, to me, I think when Book Talk, or the sub sort of channel on TikTok, as it's known, took off, there were really kind of like 10 sorts of books that were really working there. And those readers, I think it was a real question of like, when the world opens back up and there's more entertainment options and things like that, will those people continue reading? And they have. And the really interesting thing for us is that they're really starting to like individualize their reading journeys. So whereas like we were selling a ton of these 10 very popular books in the first couple of years of the pandemic, it is now really diffuse and kind of spread out to a wide range of titles. And that to me is, as like someone who is invested in the power of reading and believes in that, I think that to me is like the single most exciting thing that's happened in the last 10 years, is that there was this sort of moment, like a Harry Potter maybe for you and me, where it's brought a bunch of people into reading. This has also really created a moment where people have gotten into reading and stayed with reading. So that to me is like the biggest overall trend. And within that, I think there's a lot of like sub trends that are happening. So one would be like the rise of romance and the way that romance is presented differently to people now. If you think, again, maybe for our generation, romance was like the bare-chested dude on the cover, and now it's like a cute animated cover that you can take on the subway and not feel so strange about reading. But there is an idea there around escapism, reading as, getting out of the world, and finding some sort of, value, reason to keep going outside of maybe the issues of the day. If you look at nonfiction in general, that has really declined over the last 5 years from where it was. Not to say that there aren't still a lot of people interested in reading nonfiction, but the overwhelming tendency in the market has been, get me out of this
terrible hellhole of reality. Yeah, okay. All right. Got it. I don't want to plunge headfirst into the hell of my life. It's interesting to me. Do you think a part of the reason why people might be sort of sticking with reading or embracing books a little bit more is just because there's so much of the visual options are kind of trash now? I mean, it does seem to me like I flip through, for example, Netflix or an Amazon Prime, and there's now more content than ever before and less that interests me. Yeah. Right. Whereas maybe there's been more of a consolidation on the book side. Like it's harder to get published. It's harder to find, like, good quality content's harder to come by. But when you get it, it's much better.
Yeah, and I think we've heard from the film and TV side of the world that a lot of these providers are now literally generating content that they refer to as second screen content, because they know people are on their phones and they just want something that's like a wallpaper kind of behind them. And I think that does lead to a weakening of that as like a place that people are looking to for entertainment. And I think there's something, another big trend and something that is happening in nonfiction is a lot of books about, what do phones in our hands at all hours of the day, what are they doing to our brains? And I think people, in the way that they want to maybe escape reality, they also want to escape that phone in their pocket. Right. And something as old-fashioned as a book, as something as analog as a book that demands your attention and forces you to focus, I think people are finding a lot of value in that in almost a meditative kind of way. So I think that's another piece of it for sure, that idea of like the weakening of the entertainment sphere versus, this is a medium that has always worked for people since they were invented, even in today's sort of focus challenge times. I think people are really looking for that moment to sort of get away from those screaming 1,000 ads in your phone.
That's actually really quite heartening, and suggests to me that maybe there's a bit of a cultural shift that is going in the right direction. God help us. One single cultural trend line that's going in a positive direction. Just one. We'll take it. We'll take it.
Yep. Gladly.
And of course, when we're talking about not watching on the screens and on the phones, we don't mean the Line podcast, ladies and gentlemen, or On the Line. This is good content. This is broccoli content, not but fun broccoli content. This is not like, my kids are now into what Italian brain rot video. There's a special kind of, I don't understand. Anyway, I don't need to talk about that right now. There were two things that I actually wanted to bring up with you. One is the sort of generalized, this is an old controversy now, but I figured I'd rehash it. The old charm or the old chestnut about whether or not adults should be reading young adult content. Of course, we know there's been like this huge, explosive growth in young adult content, and it's really, really wonderful that teenagers are getting into books, especially I think a lot of teenage women are getting into books. I think that is so fantastic. But the flip side of all this, the dark side of all this, is that more adult women are reading teenage books. And, I think we should be judging them negatively for it. What do you think?
I think we might be on slightly opposite ends of this one, Jen, I'm sorry to say. I think I am a nonfiction person, right? I want to encourage people to read books that matter and, make a change in your life and address the issues of the day. I also think that for me and for maybe people of our generation, this is a reference that you might appreciate. I think everyone at a certain point needs like Jules' book of poetry. Oh
no! Oh, I feel seen.
Might have hit the nail on the head there a little bit. Listen, I'm not advocating for you to go back and reread Jules' book of poetry.
I'm a little. You triggered me a little bit, and I'm feeling a little defensive. I'm feeling a little bit defensive now.
I'm in the same place. I was that person too. It's okay. But
you did not read. I now have vivid flashbacks of like that particular color of blue. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. I've aged myself.
I believe that people reading in general is a good thing. And if you're reading content that maybe isn't the most challenging, but you're getting something out of it, that is a good thing. It's a habit building thing, right?
I felt I was very deep when I was reading.
Me too.
Me too. Thank you. I thought
I was feeling the feelings, and I was like, "Wow, I'm a human being." And
I'm a human being. I'm very smart. Don't you see how smart I am?
That's right. But listen, like, if that book came to you at that time and you felt something about it, that I think gave you something and said to you, like, "Hey, reading is valuable." At the end of the day, right? Like, it may not be the most high value thing in terms of what you were consuming, but it was something that gave you something. And I think that puts you in the habit of when you want to explore something maybe a little deeper, a little more impactful, a little more literary, whatever your definition of value is, then that just puts you in the place to fully appreciate that when it comes around. So I hear you. I want those people to spread out, expand their horizons. I think they will. But in a moment that maybe is challenging, or you need an escape, or you just need some fun, I don't think there's anything wrong with that in the, big picture sense of it.
I guess, and also the flip side, if you are someone who, one of the problems that I ran into as a journalist is that I'm constantly consuming short form content, usually written short form content, because I'm just constantly inundated with this. And I found that my ability to focus on long form content diminished as a result of it, just as a fraction of my job. And like, I read so much in my job. Do I really want to sit down and read a book? It's just, okay. Yeah. Actually, I just want to brain rot for a little bit, and it's fine. But one thing I found that did get me back into books was a little bit of good fantasy trash.
Yeah, right, right.
And if that gets me back into a place where I can reestablish my focus and my sense of connection outside of a phone or outside of a screen, then it's to the good, even if the book is, an adult version of sexy college Harry Potter going to like college Harry Potter. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, totally. There are worse things for you to do at that time.
I can just enjoy things. It's okay. I don't need to be judgy about it.
Not every moment needs to give you
I don't need to prove. I don't need to prove that I'm smart. It's fine.
That's right, Jen. You are
I'm just,
smart, by the way, but yes.
it doesn't even matter. It doesn't, I don't require your validation. I'm fine.
Good.
The other one I wanted to just bring up, and again, this is a bit of an old chestnut, but I'd be curious about your point of view on it. And that is something that I read a couple of years ago about just how millennial writers don't have voice. That there's something to, and I think there's actually something to this. I don't think it's universally true, but generationally speaking, boomers, the quintessentially self-centered generation. I mean, one of the upsides of being a quintessentially self-centered generation is that it really does foster a kind of creative, I don't know, for lack of a better term, selfishness and individuality. And you read that in a lot of that generation's books. Like each author really has a very distinctive voice. One thing that when I started writing was was working to develop my own voice. And I mean, one of the ways that I learned to do that was I actually would like read a writer and then I would try to mimic their cadence in my newspaper copy, which was actually really fun. And you'd be surprised how much I got away with it. It was true. Editors didn't really spot me doing it, but it actually became a really good way for me to develop my own voice and my own cadence, right? My own style. But there is something that I think that there's some truth to this. A lot of millennial and younger writers all do kind of sound the same. Like there's something about a writer's voice. When you read a column by X or Y or a piece of writing by X or Y, you don't need to put the name on it. You can hear that person's voice in your head. And that is something that most writers spend time working actively or used to spend time working actively to develop, was their own writing style, their own voice, their own cadence. And I do think younger writers aren't doing that as much. But is that that's based on just some critical writing about the matter. But is that just me being old woman yelling at the clouds, or is there something to that critique?
Yeah, no, I think there is. And if you want to have me back on to talk about most anticipated fall books, I'll tell you about Zadie Smith's new book of essays, which I am reading now and loving. But in it, she obviously taught creative writing at some of America's top schools. And she has an essay about that exact topic, which is about this idea of writers need to be sort of open to possibility, is her argument. And the idea of what I think a lot of her struggles in teaching creative writing to people was that folks were looking for validation of their own experience as opposed to the possibility of what literature is supposed to do, and that is, put you into someone else's shoes. And I think the thing that she identified with is that a lot of younger writers are looking for validation, are looking for some kind of confirmation that their experience resonates as true with other people in their cohort. And while there is some of that going on, what it actually leads to is like a kind of closed-mindedness around getting into someone else's head, that all of the literature that she was seeing was focused on the very specific personal experience of this one person. And her idea is like, the whole point here is that I'm supposed to feel connected to you. And if you might be telling me literally what happened in your life, but if you can't make me feel something about it, then that hasn't actually succeeded as a work of literature, which, you can argue the merits of that argument. But I think that idea of a similar tone or a similar goal almost from a lot of the younger writers is actually fundamentally kind of different from writers of maybe our generation or the generation before us.
I think even with the generation before us more than our writers, I think my generation is just as guilty of this as anyone, but like the writers before us were like, no, fuck you. That's my opinion. Like, I don't need your validation. I'm here to tell you what's what, which is very quintessentially boomer. And I think that as the generations reacted to that, it was like, yeah, that's not really a great way of being in the world, though. And as the children who were traumatized by that, I think, maybe kind of grew up, there's a different sort of approach to being in the world, right? Like this whole idea of like, I'm here, I'm loud, I'm proud, and you got to get out of my way has definitely shifted. And I think that that's reflected in the voice. The problem is that there's something inherently selfish about being a creative, right? Yes. Like you have to be willing to say, no, this is me and I'm here to put my voice out into the world. And I don't care if you like it or not. Like, I don't need you to agree with me. I don't need you to validate my experience. So I'd be very interested to read Zadie Smith's essay there. And Also, I think I'm going to ponder that idea a little bit more because that one might fester into a column. We'll see where that goes.
Nice.
That
Great.
obnoxious boomer-like column where I impose my will on other people. Well, there you go. Well, that is, I think, our chat for today. I've really enjoyed this. I would love to have you back on to talk about fall books because I actually think this was fun. So this was great from my perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
Totally good. So anyway, that is Brandon Forsyth. He's a category manager of Indigo. Been working there for 14 years. Started from the bottom, but now he's here. And like I said, I'm going to have Brandon send us a list of all of his recommendations with links. We will be putting them in the show notes underneath. So if you want to check any of those books out, please do. Brandon, would love to have you back on again. And thank you so much for coming to On the Line.
Thank you so much, Jen.